This is offline, connected overnight. Tonight's reading, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Book 1, 75 minutes. Put this on while you sleep, while you drive, or while you wind down. Let your attention come and go. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius carries no title from its author. The Greek phrase by which scholars identify the text, to eis houton, meaning things toward oneself or simply to himself, first appears in recorded documentary history in a letter written around 907 Common Era by Aurelius of Caesarea, a Byzantine bishop and scholar who described having obtained a copy of the work. Aurelius characterized it as a rare text of considerable moral seriousness. His letter is among the earliest surviving evidence that the Meditations persisted as a transmissible text through late antiquity at all. The manuscript tradition is precarious. The Codex Aurelius described has not survived. The earliest extant manuscripts are 14th century copies. The Parazinus Graecus 1950, held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris, and a secondary manuscript in the Vatican Library in Rome. These two primary witnesses are the foundation from which all modern printed editions derive. The German humanist Wilhelm Zeilander produced the first printed edition in 1559, working in Zurich from a manuscript that has since been lost. Zeilander's Editio Princeps introduced transcription errors that propagated through subsequent scholarship for more than a century. The first English translation appeared in 1634, produced by Marcus Casaubon, classical scholar, son of the theologian Isaac Casaubon, and dedicated to King Charles I of England. Casaubon's Jacobean prose established a register in which educated English readers encountered Stoic self-examination through the 17th and 18th centuries. George Long's 1862 translation, published by George Bell and Sons in London as part of the Bond's Classical Library series, introduced a more rigorous literalism suited to Victorian scholarly demands. C.R. Haynes's 1916 Loeb Classical Library edition, Greek and English on facing pages, provided the standard bilingual scholarly reference for most of the 20th century. A.S.L. Farquharson's 1944 two-volume critical edition from Oxford University Press, containing both a newly established Greek text and extensive commentary on variant manuscript readings, remains the authoritative philological treatment in English. The translation used as the reference point for tonight's reading is Gregory Hayes's 2002 edition for the Modern Library imprint of Random House. Hayes completed the translation while finishing doctoral work in classical studies at the University of Michigan. The resulting text is spare, idiomatic, and at moments deliberately blunt, qualities suited to a 21st century readership encountering Stoic philosophy without prior formation in ancient rhetoric. The Modern Library edition reached 1 million copies in print within its first decade, making it by most measures the most widely read English rendering of the Meditations in history. Hayes's 17-page introduction provides the clearest concise account of the manuscript tradition and the work's composition available to a general scholarly audience in English. The Meditations consists of 12 books. No organizational logic governing the sequence of those 12 books has been established by scholarship. The arrangement was likely fixed after Marcus's death, possibly by a freedman or administrative secretary working from loose manuscripts drafted across many years of active military campaigns. Books 2 through 12 are composed in short, often disconnected entries, many only a sentence or two in length, addressed to Marcus himself in the second person. You, not I. They function as reminders, rebukes, self-corrections, and rehearsals of philosophical doctrine under the specific pressures of absolute political power exercised during wartime. The classicist Pierre Hadot, in his 1992 French study La Citadelle intérieure, published in English in 1998 by Harvard University Press as The Inner Citadel, characterized this mode of writing as spiritual exercises in a technical philosophical sense. Hadot's framework built on earlier work by Paul Rabot, whose 1954 German study Seelenführung, Methodic der Exerzitien und der Antike had identified systematic self-directed philosophical reflection as a distinct ancient genre, separate from formal treatise or philosophical dialogue. Hadot extended Rabot's framework specifically to Marcus and argued that the repetitive quality of books 2 through 12, the same principles restated in different formulations, returned to again and again, was not an accident of composition, but the method itself. Repetition was how the training worked. The concept at the center of that training, the hegemonikon, the rational governing faculty of the soul, was systematized primarily by Chrysippus, who headed the Stoic school in Athens from approximately 232 before Common Era until his death around 206 before Common Era, and whose prolific output, said by the ancient biographer Diogenes Laertius to have exceeded 700 texts, gave systematic form to the doctrine Zeno of Citium had founded around 300 before Common Era. Chrysippus described the hegemonikon as the seat of all impression, assent, impulse, and rational judgment, training it correctly, ensuring it assented only to what reason confirmed as true and good, was, for Chrysippus and all subsequent Stoics, the entire project of philosophy as a practical discipline. Marcus knew Stoic doctrine primarily through Epictetus, the former slave who taught at Nicopolis in northwestern Greece beginning around 90 Common Era. Epictetus, born around 50 Common Era in Hierapolis in Phrygia, in what is now southwestern Turkey, owned by a man named Epaphroditus, a freedman who had served as a secretary under the Emperor Nero, was freed sometime after Nero's death in 68 Common Era and went on to study under the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus before establishing his own school. Epictetus wrote nothing. His student Arian of Nicomedia, the same historian who produced the Anabasis Alexandri, the most authoritative surviving account of Alexander the Great's campaigns, attended the school in the early 2nd century CE and compiled his teacher's lectures into 2 texts, the Discourses, of which 4 books survive from an original 8, and the Enchiridion, a condensed handbook of the central doctrines. It was Marcus's teacher, Quintus Junius Rusticus, who placed a copy of the Discourses in Marcus's hands, a fact Marcus records specifically in Book 1, Section 7, identifying it as among the most significant things he received from Rusticus. That copy no longer exists. Its content forms the doctrinal backbone of nearly everything in Books 2 through 12, and particularly the foundational distinction between what is Ephemen, in our power, up to us, and what is uk Ephemen, not in our power, not up to us. Book 1 is structurally unlike everything in the remaining 11 books. It is written in the 3rd person rather than the 2nd. It is organized around named individuals rather than abstract principles addressed to the self. It is a catalog, 17 sections, each introduced by the Greek preposition apo, from, followed by a name, followed by a list of qualities or habits Marcus records having learned from that person. The classicist Miriam Griffin, writing in the 2003 Cambridge University Press edition of the Cambridge Companion to the Stoics, observed that Book 1 is unusual even within the broader tradition of Stoic self-examination because it is oriented outward, where the rest of the Meditations repeatedly instructs Marcus to withdraw from social opinion and the judgments of others. Book 1 reconstructs the social fabric that made his philosophical formation possible. The dating of Book 1 presents a scholarly difficulty not fully resolved. R.B. Rutherford, in his 1989 Cambridge University Press study, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. A study places the composition of the Meditations broadly in the period after 170 Common Era, when Marcus was leading Roman forces along the Danube against the Marcomannian Quadi, Germanic confederations pressing south into the Roman province of Pannonia, in what are today the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. The Marcomannic Wars lasted from mid-160 CE to Marcus's death in 180 Common Era, occupying the last 14 years of his reign, with sustained operations far from Rome. If Rutherford's dating is correct, then Book 1 was composed when Marcus was between 49 and 59 years old, and most of the people he thanks in it were already dead. Antoninus Pius, his adoptive father and predecessor as emperor, had died on March 7th, 161 Common Era. Fronto, the greatest Latin rhetorician of the 2nd century CE and Marcus's rhetoric teacher, had died around 166 Common Era. Apollonius of Chalcedon, one of his Stoic tutors, was likely dead before composition began. To read Book 1 is therefore to read a document addressed to the absent. It is retrospective accounting of formation and debt composed during military campaigns on the Danube, addressed to people most of whom could no longer hear it. Book 1 opens without preamble. No introduction, no statement of purpose, no description of the catalog's method. The first word in the Greek is apo, from. Marcus Annius Verus, known to modern scholars as Verus the Elder, to distinguish him from his grandson who bore the same birth name, was a senator who served as consul 3 times, holding the ordinary consulship in 97 Common Era under the Emperor Nerva, and again in 121 Common Era and 126 Common Era. 3 ordinary consulships placed him among the most politically prominent men of the Trajanic and Hadrianic periods. He also served as Praefectus Urbi, prefect of Rome, the highest administrative post in the city, under the Emperor Hadrian. It was under this grandfather's supervision that the young Marcus Aurelius was raised after the death of his biological father. Marcus's biological father, also named Marcus Annius Verus, Roman aristocratic naming conventions running heavily toward intergenerational repetition, died when the future emperor was approximately 3 years old, around 124 Common Era. The cause of his death is not recorded in the ancient sources. The historian Anthony Burley, in his 1987 Batsford biography Marcus Aurelius, a biography, the most detailed modern account of Marcus's life available in English, notes that the father's early death meant that Marcus grew up under the principal guidance of his grandfather in the paternal line and of his mother, Domitia Lucilla. In Gregory Hayes's 2002 translation, Section 1 reads, from my grandfather Verus, to be gentle and meek, and to refrain from all anger and passion. The Greek term rendered as gentle here has a specific philosophical register. The Stoics used the word praeotes, often translated as mildness or gentleness, to describe a disposition of rational calm that neither provokes anger in others nor allows anger to distort one's own judgment. Praeotes was contrasted in Stoic psychology with orge, anger, which the Stoics classified as a pathos, one of the passions, meaning a violent emotional disturbance arising from a false belief about externals. To be angry, in Stoic analysis, is to believe that one has been wronged in a way that warrants violent emotional response. That belief is an error. Externals cannot genuinely harm the hegemonicate, and so the disturbance they provoke is always, at its root, a cognitive mistake. The elder Verus's legacy, as Marcus records it, is the trained suppression of this class of cognitive error, not a merely temperamental gentleness, but a philosophically grounded practice of correcting false impressions before they harden into passion. Section 2 records what Marcus learned from the reputation and memory of his father, a man he knew only through the accounts of others. Hayes translates the relevant Greek phrase as reputation and by report. Farquharson renders it his memory. The difference matters. Marcus did not experience his father directly. He reconstructed him through testimony. The qualities he records learning from this reconstructed figure are modesty, eidos, the instinctive sense of reverence and shame that governs conduct in the presence of others, and virility, andreia, one of the 4 cardinal Stoic virtues, standardly translated as courage. In Stoic ethics, andreia is not physical bravery in a narrow sense, but the settled disposition to act in accordance with reason regardless of external difficulty, social pressure, or personal fear. The combination of modesty and courage in a father known only through reputation suggests that Marcus understood character as something transmissible even through indirect acquaintance, through narrative, through the testimony of those who had witnessed a life firsthand. Section 3 turns to the mother, Domitia Lucilla. She was the daughter of Publius Calvisius Tullus and Domitia Lucilla the Elder, herself descended from a family that had accumulated considerable wealth through the manufacture of roofing tiles on agricultural estates near Rome. Domitia Lucilla the Younger, Marcus's mother, was a woman of substantial personal wealth and strong cultural formation. Ancient sources indicate she was educated in Greek language and literature. Anthony Burley identifies her as among the most culturally sophisticated members of Marcus's immediate family. She died between 155 and 161 Common Era, in the years just before or just after Marcus became emperor. Marcus records learning from her piety and generosity, to abstain from wrongdoing and even from thinking of it. Simple habits, far from the ways of the wealthy. The Greek word underlying piety in this context is eusebia, which carries a broader connotation than mere religious observance. Eusebia describes a settled orientation of reverence and right relation toward the gods, toward one's parents and ancestors, toward the cosmic order itself, that governs conduct at the most fundamental level. To live frugally despite great wealth, as Marcus credits to his mother, was in the Roman aristocratic philosophical tradition a moral achievement rather than merely an economic one. Wealth, in Stoic taxonomy, was a preferred indifferent, something that could be used well or badly, but that had no intrinsic moral value. The use Domitia Lucilla made of her wealth and the habits she kept in her own person was what mattered. Section 4 is brief. Marcus thanks his great-grandfather for having arranged private instruction by good tutors rather than requiring him to attend the public schools. The figure is not named in the text. Burleigh, in his 1987 biography, suggests the reference is most plausibly to Lucius Catilius Severus, a former consul who served for a time as one of Marcus's co-guardians alongside Verus the Elder. The distinction between private philosophical instruction and the public schools of the Grammaticus and Reader mattered in the educational culture of the 2nd century Roman aristocracy. The Grammaticus taught grammar and literature. The Reader taught formal public speaking. Both were standard formation for elite Roman children. But philosophical formation, the kind that addressed the character directly, that trained the hegemonican in the systematic way the Stoics prescribed, required private arrangement with specific philosophers, many of whom were brought at considerable expense from the Greek-speaking eastern provinces of the empire. Marcus's great-grandfather's provision of that arrangement, rather than reliance on the public curriculum, is recorded as a significant gift. Section 5 is addressed to Marcus's nurse or tutor, a figure identified in the Greek as his trophius, literally his nurturer. The figure is unnamed. What Marcus records learning from this person is a list of habits so specific that it reads almost as a daily program of Stoic conduct in miniature. Not to be a partisan of the greens or blues at the chariot races in the Circus Maximus. Not to support either the Parmularius or the Scutarius in the gladiatorial arena. To endure physical hardship. To make few requests of others. To mind one's own business. To receive slander without retaliation. The circus factions, the greens and the blues, with the reds and whites as their smaller counterparts, were Marcus's lifetime already organized networks of urban political identity with reach extending far beyond sporting allegiance. The historian Alan Cameron, in his 1976 Oxford University Press study circus factions, Blues and Greens at Rome and Byzantium, documented the organizational complexity of these groups. They controlled seating in the circus, employed professional claques, served as channels of patronage and urban factional identity, and in the Greek East became proxies for doctrinal and political divisions capable of generating lethal violence. The Nika riots of 532 Common Era, in which the Blues and Greens temporarily unified against the Emperor Justinian and burned significant portions of Constantinople, were the extreme expression of a structural phenomenon already established in Marcus's day. For Marcus's tutor to have trained him explicitly not to invest emotional energy in these allegiances suggests an early recognition that the habits of partisan feeling formed in entertainment contexts transfer directly into the distortions of political judgment. It is a lesson in what the Stoics called phantasia, the governing impression, and its susceptibility to social formation. The person who trains his hegemonican to respond with strong feeling to arbitrary group membership has created a pattern that will follow him into every arena of actual decision and allegiance. The tutor's instruction was to interrupt that pattern at its formation. The Parmularius and Scutarius were gladiatorial styles, the former fighting with a small round shield, the latter with a large rectangular one, and partisan attachment to one school or style was a recognized social habit in Roman urban culture, subject to the same analysis as partisan attachment to a chariot team, arbitrary identification with one side of a paired opposition, generating a false emotional investment in an outcome with no bearing on virtue or reason. Diognetus appears in section 6 as among Marcus's earliest teachers. Ancient sources associate him with instruction in painting and other practical arts, and he may have been responsible for Marcus's initial orientation toward philosophy before the more systematic instruction from Rusticus and Apollonius. Anthony Burleigh, in his 1987 biography, notes some uncertainty in the ancient sources about whether this Diognetus is the same figure sometimes identified as Diognetus the Stoic. From Diognetus, Marcus records learning, not to be interested in trifling matters, to be skeptical of soothsayers, sorcerers, and fortune-tellers, not to keep quails for fighting, to bear philosophical discourse without difficulty, to incline toward philosophy, and to sleep on a simple mat rather than in the comfortable manner of the wealthy. The specific reference to quail fighting, ortigomachia, the practice of setting domesticated quails against each other in combat, was a recognized form of entertainment in the Greek-speaking world and a stock example in philosophical literature of the kind of trivial attachment that captures the untrained mind. Epictetus had addressed attention to trifles as a symptom of the undirected hegemonican, the mind that has not been trained to distinguish what is in its power from what is not will naturally drift toward whatever spectacle presents itself. Diognetus's influence, as Marcus records it, was primarily a redirection of attention, away from the collective entertainments of an aristocratic boy's social world and toward the serious practice of philosophy. The instruction about sleeping simply on a mat or skin rather than a soft bed belongs to the same formation. The Cynic and early Stoic traditions both held that accustoming the body to hardship was an element of philosophical training rather than mere asceticism. The argument was that the person who depends on luxury for physical comfort has allowed the body, which is among the things not up to us, to hold the hegemonican hostage. Diognetus's practical instruction in plain living was therefore continuous with the philosophical content of his teaching rather than incidental to it. Section 7 is the longest and most philosophically consequential of the early sections. It concerns Quintus Junius Rusticus, and the Debts Marcus records here are foundational to everything in the remaining 11 books of the Meditations. Quintus Junius Rusticus was a Stoic philosopher and statesman. He held the ordinary consulship in 162 Common Era, the first year of Marcus's reign as emperor, an appointment that signals the close relationship between teacher and ruler, since the ordinary consulship was among the most prestigious offices the emperor could confer. He subsequently served as prefect of Rome, Prefectus Urbi, from approximately 162 to 168 Common Era, the highest administrative post in the city. He was trained in the Stoic tradition, descending from Epictetus's school at Nicopolis, and served as one of Marcus's most important philosophical guide from the mid-140 CE onward, when Marcus was in his mid-20s. In a letter to his rhetoric teacher Fronto, written around 145 Common Era and preserved in the correspondence, known as the Epistulae ad Marcum Caesarum. Marcus explained that he was devoting time to philosophical study with Rusticus. Fronto's response expressed mild resignation, suggesting that the pull of philosophy was winning over the pull of rhetoric in his students' priorities. From Rusticus, Marcus records learning that his character needed correction and educating, not to be diverted into competitive philosophical debate or the production of Stoic theoretical treatises or rhetorical exercises, not to show off learned accomplishments, to read carefully and without skimming, rather than satisfying himself with a general account, not to be taken in by sophistical argument, and, critically, to have been introduced to the discourses of Epictetus, which Rusticus provided from his own library. That last gift requires particular attention. The discourses of Epictetus, compiled by Arrian of Nicomedia in the early 2nd century CE. Arrian, the historian who also produced the Anabasis Alexandri, the most authoritative surviving narrative of Alexander the Great's military campaigns, are the most direct philosophical source for the entire body of the Meditations. The distinction Epictetus taught between what is in our power and what is not, between the domain of the hegemonican and the domain of external circumstance, structures Marcus's self-examination in virtually every one of the thousands of entries across books 2 through 12. Epictetus himself, born in his slavery around 50 Common Era in Hierapolis in Phrygia, in what is now southwestern Turkey, owned by Epaphroditus, a freedman who had worked as a secretary under the Emperor Nero, had made this distinction the central teaching of his school, drawing on his own biography as the most vivid possible demonstration that philosophical freedom is a condition of the rational mind, not a condition of social circumstance. He had studied under the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, whom ancient sources also name as one of the most influential Stoic teachers of the 1st century CE. Rusticus appears in the historical record in a second capacity that illuminates the political and intellectual tensions of the 2nd century CE. Around 165 Common Era, in his role as prefect of Rome, Rusticus presided over the judicial proceedings that ended in the execution of Justin Martyr, a philosopher who had studied Platonism, converted to Christianity in the 130 CE, and established a philosophical school in Rome, where he taught an intellectualized version of Christian doctrine. The Acta Justini, the Acts of Justin, preserve a record of the exchange between the prefect and the accused. Rusticus asked Justin what doctrine he followed. Justin replied that he had studied many philosophies and found Christian teaching to be the truest. Rusticus, after requiring Justin to comply with Roman practice of sacrifice to the gods, had him executed along with 6 companions. They were flogged and beheaded. The proximity of these two facts, Rusticus as the man who gave Marcus his copy of Epictetus's discourses, and Rusticus as the official who executed Justin Martyr, registers the specific complexity of the 2nd century intellectual environment in Rome. Stoic philosophy, Middle Platonism, and early Christian theology were an active and sometimes lethal competition for the allegiance of educated people throughout the empire, and the borders between them were enforced by official power as much as by philosophical argument. Section 8 concerns Apollonius of Chalcedon, another of Marcus's Stoic tutors. Details of his biography in the ancient sources are sparse. He appears to have been brought to Rome to instruct Marcus during the 140 CE and to have continued in a teaching role for a significant period. There is a story in the Historia Augusta, a collection of imperial biographies of uncertain reliability composed in the late 4th century CE, about Apollonius demanding a high fee for his instruction, to which Marcus reportedly responded with gentle irony. But the historicity of the exchange is not established. From Apollonius, Marcus records learning, moral freedom, eleutheria, freedom understood not as the absence of external constraint, but as the condition of the person whose hegemonican is no longer enslaved by passion, false opinion, or the fluctuations of external fortune. Resolute adherence to reason in all circumstances, equanimity in the face of illness and the loss of a child, in prolonged physical pain, and the demonstration that severity and gentleness could coexist in the same person, without contradiction. Eleutheria, in this philosophical sense, was, of course, particularly charged coming from the Stoic tradition that ran through Epictetus. A man who had literally been enslaved had made the philosophical concept of internal freedom the central meaning of a word that in ordinary usage described the social and legal condition he himself had been denied. That Apollonius transmitted this concept to the most powerful political figure in the Roman world at the time reflects something essential about what the Stoics meant when they insisted that freedom of character and political power were entirely separate matters. Section 9 introduces Sextus of Carinthia, who is identified in ancient sources as the grandson of Plutarch, Lucius Mestrius Plutarchus, the biographer and Middle Platonist philosopher born around 46 Common Era in Carinthia, in Boeotia, in central Greece, who died around 120 Common Era. Plutarch's parallel lives paired biographical accounts of Greek and Roman statesmen were among the most widely read texts in the cultural formation of educated Greeks and Romans in the 2nd century CE. His philosophical writings, collected as the Moralia and running to more than 60 surviving treatises, extended across topics from the proper management of anger to the nature of the Delphic oracle. Sextus, as Plutarch's grandson, appears to have carried forward the family's intellectual vocation, teaching philosophy, likely in a Platonist or eclectic mode, to Marcus and other members of the imperial circle. From Sextus, Marcus records learning, dignity without affectation, symmetes, a gravity of bearing that is intrinsic rather than performed, attentive care for the needs of one's friends, tolerance of those who hold unreasoned opinions, the ability to adapt one's manner to any kind of person without loss of one's own character, not needing flattery or approval, and the quality of appearing, in Sextus's case, never to think himself a philosopher at all, though he was one. The quality of semnetes, as Marcus identifies it in Sextus, deserves attention. The Stoics distinguished sharply between the outward performance of philosophical virtue and its actual possession. Affectation, the adoption of the mannerisms of philosophy without having done the philosophical work, was understood as a form of self-deception and social dishonesty. The person who performs the philosopher without being one has confused the sign with the thing signified. That Marcus locates in Sextus the genuine article, the gravity that arises from actual formation rather than from the desire to appear formed, places Sextus in a particular category. Not merely a good teacher, but a living demonstration of what philosophical training was supposed to produce. The quality of appearing not to think himself a philosopher is, paradoxically, the quality that marks the genuine philosopher most clearly in Marcus's account. Section 10 addresses Alexander, the grammarian, most likely Alexander of Codium in Phrygia, who served as a teacher of Greek language and literature and was at some point associated with the imperial household. The identification is not certain, but is the standard scholarly consensus. From him, Marcus records learning a specific pedagogical principle, not to rebuke those who make errors of grammar or usage, but to supply the correct form by implication, by using it naturally in one's own speech, so that the correction arrives without the social humiliation of direct fault-finding. Also, not to praise in a sycophantic way. The pedagogical principle is precise. Direct correction of error, especially in a public setting, can create resistance and resentment that undermine the educational purpose. To introduce the correct form by example rather than by explicit correction allows the other person to absorb the adjustment without being formally shamed. That Marcus regarded this as a lesson worth recording in his private philosophical notes suggests he considered it relevant to the management of his relationships at the highest levels of power, where those being corrected were senators, generals, and administrators whose cooperation was essential and whose dignity therefore had to be managed with care. Marcus Cornelius Fronto was, by the consensus of his contemporaries, the greatest Latin orator of the 2nd century CE. Born around 100 Common Era in Cirta, the capital of Numidia, in what is now northeastern Algeria, near the modern city of Constantine. He rose through the standard Roman sequence of magistracies, the cursus honorum, to reach the ordinary consulship in 143 Common Era. Before that consulship, and likely beginning around 139 Common Era, when Marcus Aurelius was 18, Fronto served as the primary rhetoric teacher to both adopted sons of the Emperor Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, who would later co-reign with Marcus from 161 to 169 Common Era. The correspondence between Fronto and Marcus, studied as the Epistulae ad Marcum Caesarum, the letters to Marcus Caesar, survived in the modern period through a discovery made in 1815 by the Italian classical scholar Angelo Mai, working in the Ambrosian Library in Milan. Mai identified a palimpsest, a manuscript for which an earlier text had been partially scraped and overwritten with a different text. Beneath the later writing, Mai found fragmentary portions of Fronto's letters along with works by Cicero and others. He published his findings in Rome in 1823. The letters, fragmentary and incomplete but genuine, reveal a warm and sometimes playful relationship between teacher and student. Fronto clearly admired Marcus's intelligence and engaged him seriously. He also, equally clearly, pushed back against Marcus's growing preference for philosophical study over the rhetorical training Fronto considered the proper formation of a Roman leader. From Fronto, Marcus records in section 11 learning to observe what envy, duplicity, and hypocrisy are as they actually appear in a tyrant, and that the patrician class was, generally speaking, somewhat deficient in genuine parental affection. These are not the lessons one might expect from a teacher of oratory. They are observations about power and its characteristic pathologies, specifically the deformations of character that result from the exercise of absolute authority without philosophical formation. Anthony Burley, in his 1987 biography, suggests this section reflects the accumulated political wisdom of a man who had spent decades at the center of imperial Rome, where flattery, dissimulation, and the manipulation of appearances were standard tools of survival for those operating near the emperor. That Marcus records having learned to identify these qualities in others, and by implication to guard against them in himself, reflects a kind of political education that went beyond the formal training in persuasion and verbal style that Fronto was engaged to provide. Section 12 is among the briefest entries in Book 1. It addresses Alexander the Platonist, a different figure from Alexander the Grammarian in Section 10. This second Alexander is thought by most scholars to have been a Greek intellectual associated with the Middle Platonist tradition who served in some capacity near Marcus, possibly as a secretary or philosophical companion in the imperial circle. From him, Marcus records learning, not to say frequently or unnecessarily the phrase, "I have no time," not to use this expression as a habitual evasion of obligations to friends and correspondents. The brevity of the lesson makes its content easy to pass over. Within the Stoic framework, however, the habit Marcus is warned against is philosophically significant. The claim that one has no time is a statement about the allocation of the hegemonic's attention, and that allocation is precisely among the things in one's power. To claim powerlessness over one's own time is to misidentify the seat of agency. For a person holding absolute political power, for whom the objective demands on his attention were enormous and potentially endless, the temptation to deploy this evasion would have been particularly available and particularly dangerous. The lesson from Alexander the Platonist is therefore a lesson in the specific way that power corrupts not through ambition or greed, but through the gradual erosion of one's sense of responsibility to those one governs and to those one calls friends. Section 13 addresses Catullus, likely Cinna Catullus, a Stoic philosopher associated with Marcus's circle in Rome. From Catullus, Marcus records learning, not to be contemptuous of a friend's complaint even when the complaint seems unreasonable, to restore good feeling to a relationship after a rupture, making the effort genuinely rather than merely performing the social motions, to speak well of teachers with genuine affection, as is reported of the examples of Domitius and Athenodotus, two figures who appear only in this passage and whose identities have not been established with certainty in scholarship, and to love one's children genuinely. The instruction to attend to a friend's grievance, even when it appears irrational, sits within the broader Stoic account of oikiosis, the natural affiliation of rational beings toward each other. Oikiosis, a term developed systematically by Chrysippus and his successors, describes the process by which the sphere of appropriate concern naturally extends outward from the self to encompass family members, then members of one's broader community, then all rational beings. The obligations created by this extension are not merely conventional or legal. They are, in Stoic analysis, expressions of the rational structure of the universe itself. A friend's complaint, even when it seems irrational, is a datum about that person's condition that the Stoic is obliged to attend to, precisely because the friend falls within the circle of those toward whom natural affiliation creates real obligations. Dismissing the complaint as unreasonable, treating the friend's emotional state as not worth engaging because it fails a test of rationality is to apply the wrong standard. The friend is not a logical argument. The friend is a rational being in a particular condition, and that condition has claims on one's attention regardless of its apparent reasonableness. Section 14 is among the most politically charged entries in Book 1. It addresses Marcus's brother Severus, not a biological brother, but a companion addressed with the familial term adelphos. The figure is generally identified by scholars as Gnaeus Claudius Severus Arabianus, who held the ordinary consulship in 146 Common Era and again in 173 Common Era, and who was married to Aeneia Cornificia Faustina, Marcus's biological sister. From Severus, Marcus records learning, to love his kin, to love truth, to love justice, and to have come to know, through Severus's influence, the examples of Thrasiopitus, Helvidius Priscus, Cato, Dio, and Brutus. Each name on this list carries specific historical weight. Publius Clodius Thrasiopatus was a Stoic senator who died in 66 Common Era by order of the Emperor Nero. Thracia had spent years engaged in what Roman sources describe as principled senatorial opposition. Withdrawal of attendance from proceedings he considered dishonest, ostentatious neutrality at moments when the Senate was being pressed to legitimate Nero's actions. Eventually Nero moved against him, and Thracia opened his veins in 66 Common Era. His death was documented by the historian Tacitus, who treated it as among the defining events of Nero's reign in the annals. Thracia's son-in-law, Helvidius Priscus, continued this tradition of senatorial philosophical opposition into the Flavian period. Helvidius was exiled by the Emperor Vespasian, recalled, then executed, probably around 75 Common Era, after what the ancient sources describe as a collision between his philosophical frankness in the Senate and the emperor's patience. Epictetus, in his discourses as compiled by Arrian, cited Helvidius as an exemplar of the Stoic who maintained the integrity of his judgment under the direct pressure of imperial power, choosing consistency of principle over political survival. Marcus Porcius Cato Uticensis, Cato the Younger, died at Utica in North Africa in 46 before Common Era, choosing death over accepting a pardon from Julius Caesar after the defeat of Pompey's forces at the Battle of Thapsus. In Stoic tradition, Cato's death was the defining example of the philosopher in politics, the man who, when forced to choose between the integrity of his principles and his physical survival, chose without hesitation to preserve the former at the cost of the latter. Cicero eulogized Cato. The philosopher Seneca returned to Cato's example repeatedly in his Epistolae Moralis. By Marcus's time, Cato had accumulated nearly a century of Stoic veneration as the model of what a Roman philosopher-statesman could be. Dio of Prusa, known as Dio Chrysostom, the golden mouth from the quality of his public speaking, was a Greek orator and philosopher who lived from approximately 40 to 120 Common Era. He was exiled by the Emperor Domitian around 82 Common Era and spent years traveling through the Greek-speaking world before being recalled under Nerva. His 40 surviving discourses addressed kings, tyrants, and ordinary citizens on themes of virtue, the philosophical life, and the obligations of power. His figure as a thinker who maintained philosophical integrity through political exile made him, for Marcus's generation, a model of intellectual independence under coercive pressure. Marcus Junius Brutus, one of the principal conspirators in the assassination of Julius Caesar on March 15th, 44 before Common Era, is the most politically ambiguous figure in Severus's catalog. The long shadow of the Julian and Julio-Claudian dynasties over Roman political mythology made open admiration for Brutus a complicated stance even in the 2nd century CE. That Marcus records having learned to admire Brutus through Severus suggests that within his philosophical circle, the events of 44 before Common Era were evaluated through the Stoic lens of individual virtue under political crisis rather than through the lens of dynastic loyalty. From Severus also, Marcus records learning the concept of a commonwealth governed according to a law common to all, administered with regard to equal rights and equal freedom of speech, and the idea of a kingly power that prizes, above all, the freedom of those governed. This is the closest Book 1 comes to explicit political philosophy, and it traces its lineage back to Plato's Republic of the early 4th century BCE and forward through generations of Hellenistic and Roman advice literature on the character of the good king, the Basileus who rules in the interest of the ruled rather than in the interest of his own power. Section 15 addresses Maximus, identified by most scholars as Claudius Maximus, a Stoic philosopher and statesman who served as proconsul of Africa, governor of the province of Africa Proconsularis, in the early 150s CE. He appears as the presiding judge in the Apologia of Lucius Apuleius, the speech that Apuleius delivered in his own defense at Sabratha around 158 Common Era against accusations of practicing magic to secure a wealthy widow's marriage. Apuleius describes Claudius Maximus in the Apologia as a man of philosophical gravity and practical authority, a characterization that aligns closely with the portrait Marcus gives in section 15. From Maximus, Marcus records learning, self-control and steadfast adherence to one's purpose even in illness, in the loss of a child, in acute physical pain, cheerfulness in all circumstances, doing what is to be done without complaint, the quality that everyone believed in Maximus what he actually said, gravity without affectation, never excessive or deficient in anything, combining gentleness with firmness, authority based entirely on character rather than on office or social position, certainty without arrogance, and the absence of vanity or envy. The portrait is of a man who had approached what the Stoics called the spaideos, literally the serious person, or more precisely the fully virtuous person, an ideal the Stoics also described as the sophos, the sage. Stoic ethics drew a sharp distinction between the prokopton, the person who is making progress toward virtue but has not yet achieved it, and the sophos, the sage who has fully realized rational virtue across every domain of life. Most Stoic thinkers acknowledge that the actual sage was extremely rare. Chrysippus had observed that the sage might appear perhaps once in several generations, but the ideal served as the orienting standard against which actual human progress could be measured. Marcus's portrait of Maximus reads as the closest approximation to this standard that he encountered in his lived experience, a man whose conduct was consistent with his stated beliefs, whose bearing communicated authority without performance, and who remained cheerful, genuinely cheerful, not performatively so, across the full range of circumstances the Stoics considered most testing. The specific qualities of never being excessive or deficient, and of combining gentleness with firmness, carry philosophical precision within the Stoic system. Excess and deficiency in the passions and in conduct were standard Aristotelian ethical categories, describing the failure states on either side of the virtuous mean. That Marcus uses them in a Stoic context suggests the eclecticism characteristic of 2nd century philosophical formation, in which strict school boundaries were less important than the practical usefulness of a given analytical framework. The combination of gentleness and firmness, praeotes, and the resolute quality that Stoics described as to Baban appears in Marcus's character portraits as the defining mark of the person who has genuinely internalized both the social and the rational dimensions of Stoic virtue. Neither softness nor harshness, but the settled character of a person who has nothing to prove and nothing to fear from the judgment of others. Section 16 is the longest entry in Book 1. It concerns Antoninus Pius, Titus Aurelius Fulvus Boionius Arius Antoninus, who ruled as emperor from 138 Common Era until his death on March 7, 161 Common Era. Antoninus was Marcus's adoptive father. The adoption was arranged by the dying Emperor Hadrian in January 138 Common Era, with a specific condition that Antoninus in turn adopt both Marcus and the boy who would become Lucius Verus. The arrangement secured a chain of succession across 3 intended rulers. Antoninus Pius held power for nearly 23 years, the longest reign between Augustus and Diocletian, with a stability and absence of internal crisis remarkable in the context of Roman imperial history. The historian Edward Gibbon, in the first volume of the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, published in 1776, described the reigns of Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius from 96 to 180 Common Era, as the period in recorded history during which the human race had been most prosperous and most justly governed. Whatever the accuracy of that characterization at the scale of the empire as a whole, it reflects the specific achievement of Antoninus's 23 years, the maintenance of internal order, legal equity, and financial stability without recourse to political terror, systematic purges, or the manipulation of the Senate through fear. Marcus's account of what he learned from Antoninus is remarkable for the breadth and specificity of its catalog. From him, patience under difficulty and with difficult people, willingness to examine criticism of his conduct and judge it on its merits, contentment in all circumstances, kindness to everyone who came into contact with him, equanimity between periods of activity and periods of rest, the quality of being thoroughly prepared in whatever he undertook, thoroughness in following up on public business, capacity for sustained attention to detail, absence of vanity about honors, thrift and economy in public expenditure, the ability to endure criticism from philosophers without taking offense, and to engage with them substantively rather than dismissively, sociability, genuinely taking pleasure in the company of friends, capacity for sustained friendship with specific individuals over many years, not being changeable or capricious in forming or dissolving relationships, never needing to be pleased by flattery, attention to the needs of individual people rather than relying entirely on the general machinery of imperial administration. Several specific details Marcus records are concrete and notable. Antoninus never left Italy during his entire reign, a deliberate policy that Marcus appears to regard as a mark of restraint and administrative competence, contrasting implicitly with the extensive provincial tours of his predecessor Hadrian, who spent substantial portions of his reign traveling to the provinces and was absent from Rome for years at a stretch. Antoninus received philosophers with genuine interest rather than aristocratic condescension. He was careful with public money in a way that was not miserliness. Marcus distinguishes between economy and meanness, but a principled awareness that the resources of the state were not personal property to be deployed for private display. The Stoic virtue most prominently displayed in Marcus's portrait of Antoninus is what the Greek philosophical tradition called metriopatheia, the moderation of the passions, a middle condition between the full Stoic ideal of apatheia, the complete absence of passion achieved through the correction of all false judgment about externals, and the ordinary emotional reactivity of the unphilosophical person. Metriopatheia was technically more characteristic of the peripatetic school, founded by Aristotle, than of strict Stoic doctrine. But in practice, the distinction between Stoic apatheia and peripatetic metriopatheia was one that second-century thinkers did not always observe with precision. And Marcus's portrait of Antoninus is consistent with a reading of Stoic virtue as including the stable moderation of effect rather than requiring its complete extirpation. The detail about Antoninus in medicine is specific. Marcus records that his adoptive father was attentive to the prescriptions of the medical men who attended him and patient with the regimens they required, without being excessively dependent on them or anxious about them. For the Stoics, the body was among the things not in our power, uk efhemen, and was therefore to be maintained reasonably without being made the object of excessive concern. The person who is anxious about the body's condition has allowed something not up to him to capture the attention of the hegemonikon, which is itself the only thing genuinely up to him. Antoninus's relationship to medical care, as Marcus describes it, exemplifies this balance. Cooperative with the physician's expertise, but neither fearful about physical decline nor deluded into thinking that medical intervention could resolve what was ultimately subject to the natural course of things. The catalog of Antoninus's qualities in section 16 closes with what Marcus identifies as the most important lesson: to understand what it means to rule a commonwealth, a residential publica, in such a way that the ruler's conduct demonstrates, not just declares, that wealth, longevity, and political power are possible for a man who is genuinely indifferent to them. This is the Stoic philosophical emperor ideal, not the ruler who holds power because he desires it, but the ruler who exercises it well precisely because he holds it at a philosophical distance. Marcus spent the rest of his reign attempting to live up to this demonstration. The final section of Book 1 is addressed not to a named human individual, but to the gods, the divine cosmic order, the logos that in Stoic cosmology was both the rational principle structuring the universe and the divine presence immanent in all rational beings. Section 17 is the longest prose passage in Book 1 and the most comprehensive of its catalogs. It moves from the specific to the general, from named individuals to overarching providential arrangement, and from the human teachers listed in sections 1 through 16 to the broader circumstances of a life that Marcus acknowledges as having been shaped by more than any single teacher or relationship. The Stoic theological framework that makes section 17 coherent is the doctrine of pronoia, divine providence, which holds that the cosmic logos governs the universe rationally and that the sequence of events in any individual life, taken as a whole, expresses a rational order even when any particular event appears arbitrary or painful. This doctrine was foundational to Stoic cosmology from Chrysippus onward, and it is the framework Marcus returns to repeatedly throughout books 2 through 12, often in the formulation that what is good for the whole cosmos must be good for its rational parts, and that the rational person aligns herself or himself with the providential order rather than resisting it through false judgments about external events. Pierre had it in The Inner Citadel, his 1998 Harvard University Press translation of a 1992 French original, emphasized that for Marcus the doctrine of pronoia was not a source of passive resignation, but of active moral commitment. To recognize that the universe is rationally ordered is to recognize that one's own rational capacity, the hegemonikon, is the most direct available participation in that cosmic rationality. The obligations imposed by the recognition of divine providence are therefore not the obligations of subject to an external authority, but of a rational being to the logos that constitutes its own most essential nature. Section 17 is Marcus's most explicit statement of this recognition, in a specific form of gratitude for the providential arrangements of his particular life. From the gods, Marcus records in section 17: good grandparents, a good father, a good mother, a good sister, good teachers, good companions, relatives, and friends, essentially good people surrounding him throughout his life, and the providential arrangement that placed all of them in sequence. He records that he did not, through natural inclination or deficiency of character, commit some act of wrongdoing against any of these people before he was old enough to have been capable of doing so, that the forming years of his character passed without an act he would need to repent, that his grandfather's concubine, the woman Verus the elder kept after the death of his grandmother, was a good woman, and that Marcus did not hold harmful prejudice against her, that he did not grow up with his biological father, but that the absence did not harm him, that he did not disgrace his privileged position by any act of pride or passion, even though he had been placed in a position, as a ward of the emperor, as a young man marked for succession, that might have produced such vices in a less careful character. The inclusion of unnamed individuals, the grandfather's concubine, unnamed tutors in early childhood, is characteristic of the moral honesty maintained throughout Book 1. Marcus is not constructing a public monument to his philosophical development. He is recording genuine debts, and genuine debts include those owed to people who would not appear in any public account of a Roman emperor's formation. That he thanks the gods for having placed a good woman in the position his grandfather's concubine occupied is not a tribute he would have needed to make, or would have been expected to make, in any formal context. He made it here because it was true. Marcus records thanks for his wife, Aeneia Galeria, Faustina the Younger, and specifically for the character she brought to their marriage. Their marriage had been arranged by Antoninus Pius in 145 Common Era, when Marcus was 24. By the time Book 1 was likely composed, they had been married for more than 25 years and had produced, by the reckoning of ancient sources, as many as 13 children, of whom approximately 7 survived to adulthood. The Historia Augusta, a collection of late imperial biographies of uncertain reliability composed in the 4th century CE, included accusations against Faustina of marital infidelity. These accusations were standard elements of the hostile biographical tradition for imperial women and carry limited evidentiary weight independent of that tradition. Marcus's private record in section 17, gratitude to the gods for the character of his wife, stands as a direct counter to the defamatory tradition without engaging it. He was not writing for a public audience. He had no political reason to praise her in a document intended only for his own eyes. That he did so reflects the actual state of his private assessment. He records thanks also for having had good children, and for having children who are not deficient in body or in mind, a detail that registers the specifically Roman aristocratic concern for the physical and intellectual quality of one's heirs. He records thanks for not having made further progress in rhetoric, in poetry, and in other disciplines in ways that would have absorbed his formation entirely. An acknowledgment that the course of his education took a direction toward philosophy rather than toward literary production, and that this direction was fortunate rather than regrettable. He records thanks for having been prompt in giving his teachers their proper respect, not putting off philosophical engagement with the excuse of business, a habit he had learned, as he noted in section 12, from Alexander the Platonist, in which he here attributes not to his own virtue, but to the fortunate providential arrangement of his character. Book 1, read as a whole, is Marcus's only sustained attempt to identify the social, familial, and pedagogical conditions that made his philosophical formation possible. The 12 books that follow it, the private memoranda composed amid military campaigns and administrative burdens during the years of the Marcomannic Wars, presuppose that formation without explaining it. They instruct, rebuke, correct, and remind a person who already knows what he is trying to be. Book 1 does the explanatory work. It names the people, the lessons, the debts, the fortunate accidents of birth and timing and circumstance that assembled across 49 or more years of a man's life, the character that the Danube Memoranda were written to maintain. The final words of section 17, in Gregory Hayes's 2002 translation, are these: all these things require the help of fortune as well as of gods. Marcus does not end on certainty. He ends on acknowledgement of contingency. The character he has formed, the debts he has cataloged across 16 sections, the lessons he has absorbed from grandfather, father, mother, tutors, philosophers, statesmen, and adoptive emperor, required not only the right teachers and the right circumstances, but also simply fortune. The Stoic who has been trained to distinguish what is in his power from what is not recognizes, at the end of the accounting, that the formation of his own capacity for such distinctions was itself, in large part, not in his power at all. Book 1 ends there. The next 11 books begin. That was Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Book 1, from offline connected overnight. Sleep well or carry on.